Hi everyone, my name is Emily Cady, and today I'm going to be presenting to you the findings of my investigation into wellness as it relates to the production practices of Boston University's stage management and performance programs within the School of Theater. Now, before we get started, I recognize that as a stage manager myself, there is a lot of jargon that we use that not all of you all may be aware of. So, for the duration of this presentation, when you hear the word call, you'll understand it as the span of time in which individuals working on a production are expected to be at activities related to that production. For stage managers and performers, these are primarily rehearsals and performances. Speaking of the word production, it actually has a few meanings. Within the larger industry, production is just a show, but here at BU, production with a capital P is a class that upperclassmen are enrolled in. This class is how they get academic credit for their work on School of Theater shows. For underclassmen, due to a recent curriculum change, the equivalent is known as Language and Craft of Theater, or LCOT. To clarify some other acronyms I may use, the School of Theater is SOT. For management roles, the stage manager can be shortened to SM, the assistant stage manager to ASM, and production assistants to PAs. Now, to dive a little bit into where this project came from, I have to catch you all up to speed on current production practices as they relate to work wellness. This diagram, created by a designer based in New Hampshire, shows what an average workday can look like when doing a 10 out of 12 call. Now, this specific type of call isn't really pertinent to the rest of the presentation, but just to give you an idea of what it is, 10 out of 12s are calls in which folks are called for a 12-hour span of day and spend 10 of those hours actively working. These calls are extremely prevalent within the industry, though concurrent with the COVID-19 pandemic, advocacy groups began to lobby for their discontinued use due to safety concerns with working long hours. The important things to note in this diagram are the constant tasks needing to be done, even during meal breaks, in spite of the already extremely long working day. These aspects of rehearsals are not unique to these type of calls and give you all a perspective from which to consider calls for the rest of this presentation. Now, as a stage manager myself who has experienced multiple 10 out of 12s in the 9 or so years that I've been working in this role, advocacy around abolishing these calls always kind of intrigued me. I hated the calls personally, as by hour 8, I was usually exhausted and not able to adequately do my job, which included looking out for the safety and well-being of other people, therefore putting both themselves and myself at risk. On top of that, by the end of each long day that we all survived, I'd have to stay late to finish my tasks before going home to do it all again the next day, with oftentimes less than a 9-hour turnaround time. Now, here at SOT, we do not officially do 10 out of 12s, but in continuing worldwide discussions about well-being, and specifically work wellness in classes such as KHC HC 401, these calls inspired me to wonder if there would be a way to study the well-being of theater practitioners as it relates specifically to their work. So I immediately dove into the literature review, in which I found absolutely nothing. No data about work wellness as it relates to theatrical work. There were tons of studies regarding work wellness in traditional workplaces, such as offices, but none highlighting the specific intersection of physical labor, logistical thinking, and creativity that is required in the performing arts. Thus, the concept and goal of my project was born, to collect as much data as humanly possible on the well-being of theater practitioners as it relates specifically to their work. In building the project itself, I ultimately decided to survey undergraduate stage managers and performers on 10 selected SOT shows. Our production practices here are built off of the real-world experiences of our instructors, and thus this population can be seen as a subset of the working industry. The selected productions included plays, musicals, opera, and devised work, and ultimately encompassed 124 eligible participants, all of whom were either stage managers or performers. Out of the 253 total collected surveys, the majority of survey responses came from performers, though stage managers had the highest survey completion rate. It should also be noted that on any given production, there will only be one stage manager, up to 2 ASMs, and up to 4 PAs, whereas the average cast size of the selected productions was about 9. Now, in order to maximize the number of factors I would be able to compare data against, I chose to survey folks at 4 points in each respective production process. Each of these surveys would represent a part of the process in which the work being done was different than that of the previous part of the process. At first rehearsal, we engage in primarily business, welcome, and a reader sing-through. In studio or staging rehearsals, the show gets put up on its feet, and this is where we learn what performers will be doing. In tech, the cast performance is combined with technical elements in what are usually longer rehearsals, and this work all culminates in performances, in which the work is shared with the public once or twice a day for the duration of the run, which is usually about a weekend here at SOT. The 10 productions I surveyed averaged about 5 weeks of span of process, with the majority of that time being spent in studio rehearsals, followed by about a week of tech. Now, with all this talk of scheduling, one of my primary questions regarding this data collection was how much time do stage managers and performers actually spend working on their productions? In the survey, participants were asked to report how long they were scheduled to be in call, how long they actually spent in their calls, and how much time they spent working on their productions outside of their call on each respective survey date. For these figures, the average total times are separated by role. Now, we can see in these figures that total working time increases across roles during technical rehearsals. In addition, we can also observe that stage management team members spend consistently more time working than performers. It should be noted, however, that stage managers are expected to spend more time in their calls than performers across the production process. However, the average added time required of stage managers is less than the actual average differences in time working between stage managers and performers, meaning that stage managers are spending more time working than what they're supposed to. Now, in turning towards the well-being results, the following figures reflect responses collected across survey dates. In total, 90 individuals, or about 35% of responses, reported experiencing physical distress. In addition, 42 total individuals, or about 16% of responses, reported experiencing physical distress as a result of their call. In this project, physical distress was defined as including, but not limited to, illness, pain, and other physical ailments. Similarly, albeit slightly increased when compared to that of physical well-being, 37% of responses, or 95 individuals, reported experiencing emotional distress. And with that, about 19% of responses, or 48 individuals, reported experiencing emotional distress as a result of their call. Now, to wrap up the results of this project through a more holistic lens, this figure examines average quantified well-being across all survey dates by role. Perhaps the most shocking statistic to me was that relating to production assistants. PAs experienced consistently the greatest reported overall well-being. However, PAs were the only group of respondents to not experience an increase in their overall well-being during their calls while they were actively working. This may be alluding to the fact that PAs, as LCOT freshmen, may not be intending to major in either stage management or performance programs. All other roles, however, did experience an increase in their overall well-being during their calls while they were actively working. Though the goal of this project was only to complete a data collection of this previously underrepresented field, and ultimately that goal was met, this completion of the project suggests the following considerations for future work of this nature. First, this methodology would have to be greatly reimagined to allow for data collection of other theatrical disciplines who have varying types of calls, primarily that of design and production folks. In addition, how would changing the methodology to survey participants on a daily basis instead of at 4 points in the production process impact the findings? At its core, this project is about visualizing the work of theater practitioners in a way that allows for palpable change. It is my hope that this data and any future projects inspired by it pave the way for a more equitable future of the theater industry that centers wellness and human experience in process. Thank you.
We have time, 4 minutes, for any questions in the audience.
Hey, Emily, that was really good. I witnessed firsthand how often and how much you worked freshman and sophomore year, but I was pretty shocked that there's so little research done on this. How do you see that changing, or maybe like why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's there's a dissonance in the creative and traditionally academic communities in which neither really overlaps with the other at all, which is part of why I wanted to do this project, because I have interests in both fields. And it's my hope that by doing this, which is kind of the first of its kind, there's also a concurrent project happening. I don't remember exactly where right now, but someone is doing a project very similar to this and collecting data on work wellness of stage managers and performers. So I'm hoping that with all the conversations about well-being that we're having like largely across culture, that it will translate to the field.
Hey, I really love this talk about like looking into the future and like ways that we can make it more equitable. Do you have any ideas of like things that can be done in the rehearsal room and outside the rehearsal room to help make sure that everyone is working the hours they are capable of doing and keeping everybody well?
Totally. I think we talk a lot about it in SOT practices already, but like boundary setting is super important, but also being upfront with people before you start a process of like, what are the time requirements of this process specifically, and how can we maybe reimagine the broader schedule of a production to incorporate shorter days and a longer overall production period?
I think we have time for one more question if anyone has. If not, thank you so much.